Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, August 28th, 2023 at 7 p.m. Tonight we have 3 committee meetings. The first one is City and Safety Services. This is chaired by Councilmember McCary, joined by Council Members Grace, Swank, and Crowell.
Thank you, President Nisley. We have 2 items on our agenda for our City and Safety Services Committee this evening, beginning with the disposal of police department firearms and ammunition. It's my understanding that we have a few dozen or more items to dispose of and would like to get an update from our City and Safety Services Director Stone.
Sure. Thank you, Member McCary. This is a pretty standard business ordinance. It doesn't happen that frequently. We usually wait until there's a significant mass of weapons that have been seized in various infractions and are in evidence but have been released by the court to basically stay in the possession of the police department. And in very long bygone days, we would auction these and do similar things, and we don't do that any longer. All of these will be traded in to our standard supplier for firearms and ammunition, which is Vance's Outdoor in Columbus, for store credit, and then we use that to basically, when the department has a need, they can use that credit then from there. So that's the approach for these disposals. But some of them are valued. I mean, it's difficult to say how many are valued at more than $1,000 a piece. So because of that, we just basically see, and they're all serial numbered. And from a tracking purposes, a good government perspective, we think it's appropriate to have City Council approve the disposal.
Thank you. Can you share with us any projections on this quantity of trade-in?
Sure. So I think it's around 40 weapons. I don't think it will be worth $40,000, but like I said, I don't think that there's a, to say this, we haven't done that much, put that much effort into appraisals to say, this is worth that much and this is worth that much. We just went ahead, they all have serial numbers. It's more appropriate just to go ahead and allow the council to dispose of. So, if we get $15,000 in store credit, that'd be great.
And I was also going to ask if you could share a few educational comments about how we select our vendor out of Columbus.
I will have to get back to you on that. I know that Vance's Outdoor is a vendor of choice that we've used for a number of years. We made a switch a few years ago from a 40 caliber to a 9mm as our particular weapon of choice, simply because of cost of ammunition. And Vance's, I think, gave us the best deal when we made that switch, and so I think we've just stayed with them.
Thank you. Is it possible that we would get a greater trade-in value with another place, or are we contracted to go with Columbus folks?
I don't know that there's any particular restriction. However, that's certainly something that we can look into. I don't think that this particular ordinance specifies a vendor, so I'll ask the department to look into, if they shop it around.
Oh, thank you. Questions from other committee members? Councilmember Swank.
2. When was the last time we did this?
I believe, I want to say we did this in 2017, okay. Maybe. It was a while ago.
Yeah, a while ago, yeah.
And it was with Vance's then as well.
Okay.
I can speak a little bit to that because I remember that conversation well, because Chief Pyle was here explaining why it was that we went with Vance's, and one of the reasons is that they're recognized by a lot of the law enforcement agencies in the state of Ohio. But we'll certainly get more information for all of you if you care to know. But Member Swank, it's been a while.
Okay, yeah, good. This isn't a every year thing.
No.
Okay. Second thing is, I guess, more of a point to the thing with Vance. There is a company in Burton, Ohio, with a branch in Cody, Wyoming, called thegunrunner.com that deals in particularly vintage and valuable guns. And I looked at that list earlier today. I'm not a gun person, so I don't know if we're looking at 57 Chevys there or 73 AMC Pacers, where you're not going to get anything. But that's a possibility, something to look at as a resource for that. And they will appraise your stuff at no particular cost.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you, Councilmember Swank. Other committee members? Questions from other members of council or comments? Yes, Councilmember Spielness.
Yeah, thank you for that excellent explanation of the situation, because I was curious whether these were old guns of ours or whether they were confiscated, and that's quite a long list. So it's a concern. Okay. I did talk to someone who is a gun expert, and he said that we may have tens of thousands of dollars, not teens. So I'm hoping that take a good look at that. We did look up one of them, the Glock's 43X, and a trade-in value is worth $290. Now, that's just, one small item. But I think maybe it's not a bad idea to make sure that we're getting the most value for the guns that we have, because that's a valuable asset. So, but thank you.
Sure, thank you, Member Splinas. The $15,000 number was just shooting from the hip, no pun intended. But, I will dive into it a little bit more.
Thanks.
Questions or comments from other council members? Other comments from the administration? Questions or comments from the audience? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our second agenda item for City and Safety Services, the Dairy Lane LEAX customer agreement. And we've been hearing about Dairy Lane projects for some time, but this now impacts customer shift. And I will ask Director Stone to explain a little bit of the history from the 90s of how we got to where we are today.
Sure. Thank you, Member Carey. So we have to go back about 30 years for this particular situation to the annexation of the Ridges property. And when we annexed the Ridges, when the City of Athens annexed the Ridges, there were several customers along Dairy Lane that were already being served by LEAX. And as I've spoken to you before and indicated that the law is such that if a city annexes an area that is served by a rural water district, the rural water district has the right to keep those customers unless they reach an agreement with the city. And basically the concept there is, as much of the rural water district's assets in many cases have been built by debt that has been, or by financing that has been backstopped by the federal government in order to provide water to people. And so therefore the law is such that you can't take away their customer base without them being compensated, because that customer base is how they pay off that debt. And so when we annexed the Ridges, we just allowed these customers to continue to stay on LEAX at the time, back in the 90s. Since then, City Council has passed an ordinance, and forgive me, I don't remember the year, but that basically has said when the city annexes, the city needs to require both water and sewer service be provided by the city. And so, we dealt with this most recently with Kershaw Green, and in that particular instance, we struck an arrangement with LEAX that we would collect water rents or basically water bills payments at the LEAX rate for 15 years and then remit half of that revenue to LEAX until such time that they became fully on over to the city. In this case, we're just seeking to buy the customers from LEAX outright. And so the LEAX general manager and I have been working together on a fair cost. They believe that fair cost to be $178,000. And the basis for that is if they were to basically collect average water rates or water bill payment for the next 30 years of these 8 customers with typical increases. At the end of that time, that would be the amount of money that they would have. And if they were, let me get this correct, it would actually be more than that. It would be like $200 some thousand. But if they were to take $178,000 now and put it into a CD at 3%, and then project out to 30 years from now, that would be the amount that they would have. It would equal basically the amount that they would have collected in water bills in the meantime. And so, we thought that to be basically a fair arrangement. And so what we're asking for is 2 things. Number one, an appropriation and authorization to purchase these 8 customers from LEAX for $178,000, and then additionally approve an agreement with LEAX to release all of the customers on Dairy Lane, all future customers on Dairy Lane, for that particular area. And as we all know, that there may be some future development in that area, and then that ship will have sailed, and the city will have the right to serve all those customers along Dairy Lane. All of this is in line with the fact that we are building a new water line on Dairy Lane to provide fire protection to that area. That's something we've talked about in the past, and that project is already under contract. The water line material, that ductile iron pipe should be delivered fairly soon. There was a fairly long lead time in that, and once it's delivered, they'll get started. And we're seeking to go ahead and do this now so we can jump those customers over to city service when that water line goes in the ground to avoid digging up the road twice. So that's the reason that I'm bringing that to you today.
Thank you. Clear, helpful explanation from my perspective. Questions and comments? We'll start with Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, Member McCary. Director Stone, remind me at one point, I think in regards to the Dairy Lane properties or customers, we were considering a swap. My real question is that still feasible in the future, not for these properties, but for some other, or did we decide that that wasn't going to work for some technical or legal reason?
Sure, thank you, Member Crowell. I mean, it's a touchy subject, obviously, because, once these customers come on to the city, they'll pay less than half of the price for water. And so if we were doing a swap, we would basically be doing the opposite. Those people that are on LEACs, or correction, on the city right now, if we were to give them to LEACs, and there's no requirement that a city serves extraterritorial customers. That is to say, people who are outside the city. We've just extended service in the past, and council's authorized that in the past in certain areas. But in those particular situations, if we were to go and basically give those to LEACs, you'd be more than doubling their water bill. Based upon the way that rates are now. So, when we looked at it in this particular situation, additionally, there was going to be some costs associated with the actual switch and water line construction and the quality of the line that was there in the ground, and it just didn't seem to make sense. It doesn't preclude it in the future. I think that it's certainly something that we can consider. And there are places around the periphery of the city where we overlap, and it may make sense in the future to go and, for one reason or another, because somebody's line is older or newer than the others, to go and say, well, you guys go ahead and pick these ones up, we'll pick them up, and then we'll do a swap.
Thank you.
Councilmember Swink?
If I was watching at home and I saw that or heard that we were spending $178,000 for 8 customers, I might panic a little bit. But doing the quick math, if we were to divide the $178,000 by the 8 customers over a 30-year period, that works out to $62 per month. That's not taking into account inflation over the next 30 years. Are you comfortable with that $62 initial amount per month, that we're going to be okay in the long run with this investment?
Thank you, Member Swank, and I appreciate your public math here. That's something that I don't know that I would attempt to try in this setting. However, being a LEAX customer myself, knowing that I regularly pay more than that per month, I feel pretty comfortable with that. So,
thank you.
Other committee members? Other council members? Any additional comments from the administration? Questions or comments from the audience? Okay, thank you. That concludes our City and Safety Services agenda for the evening.
Thank you, Councilmember McCary. We'll now move on to Finance and Personnel Committee, and this is chaired by Councilmember Crowell, joined by Councilmembers Reisner, Ziff, and Spelness.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to start, the podium's sort of in my way, but is that Drew that's back in our audience tonight?
Yes, sir.
Oh, welcome back. It's good to have you, and you've got a very nice suit jacket on, too. We have just appropriations on our Finance and Personnel agenda tonight, all fairly straightforward. I'll just go through these one by one. The first one is the Law Director has requested an appropriation for new flooring in her office. So this is the General Fund 101.104 Professional Services line, transaction code 300, for new flooring in the Law Director's office. Are there any questions about the Law Director's use of these funds for flooring in her office from the committee? Other members of council? City administration, anything to add?
Just to say, if you've not been into the law director's office of late, and you have gone into the auditor's office, I encourage you to go into the law director's office to see how nice it will become. It's a much needed renovation to the law director's office.
Great, thank you. Any comments from the public?
And
Yes, please.
as the law director's new intern, I'd also like to say, if you guys approve it, I'm happy to get new flooring in the law director's
That's good.
Okay, moving on to the second item on our agenda, $14,000 to the Athens Police Department. This is for medical expenses, so it will be appropriated to the personnel line. Are there any questions about this appropriation? Other members of council? City administration, anything to add? Members of the public? Excellent. Moving on to the next item on our agenda, $81,000 to the Athens Fire Department, the personnel line, and this is for a retention grant that the fire department received, plus a retirement payout. Any questions from the committee on this appropriation? Members of the council? City administration, anything to add?
These are state ARPA funds. The chief was notified here a couple weeks ago that we were awarded this, and it's I think it's $4,000 per member, and you multiply that times the number of members that were here in 2022, in June of 2022. So it is a good thing. These are outside funds that are coming to the city to do this.
And this is funding that the police department has received of late as well. So this is now the fire's turn.
Thank you for that information. Any comments from the public? Moving on to the next item on our agenda, $1,500 to the cemetery. These are for administration fees and supplies and services, transaction code. Any questions for this appropriation for the cemetery? Other members of council? Anything to add as city administration? Members of the public? Thank you. And the next item is $100 for a life insurance payment in the personnel line of the cemetery fund. Again, any questions from the committee? Other members of council? City administration? Public? And finally, the last item is a $10,000 appropriation for the DUI court fund, again in the personnel line. And this is for sort of a positions realignment connected to a grant that the court received. Any questions from the committee? Yes, Member Reisner.
Do you have any more detail on that? Is this like a diversion program or something?
As I understand, I don't have a lot of detail, and I know the auditor's office is not here tonight. But a year or more ago, there was some realignment, and there were two positions that might have been part-time that overlapped for a little bit, and they found that they were short in the line when those positions came back to their normal non-part-time.
Okay.
I'm not sure if the city administration has anything to add there. The auditor was not available for our mayor auditor meeting this week, and we didn't get a lot of detail, but I can request more information from Deputy Director Woods.
That'd be helpful.
Okay. Member Spielness, did you have something similar, or
Yeah.
same question? Okay. Yes, Member Grace.
Great minds.
I would suggest asking the clerk of courts, Tanya Dye.
Okay.
I think she could probably explain.
Great, good suggestion. Go to the source. Okay. Other members of council not on the committee? And nothing to add from the administration. Any questions from the public? Okay, thank you, President Isley. That ends Finance and Personnel.
Thank you, Councilmember Crowell. We'll move on to Transportation, chaired by Councilmember Reisner and joined by Councilmembers Grace, Ziff, and Swank.
Yeah. Lucky her.
Oh dear, my agenda just disappeared. Can I see it? Yeah, sure.
It's up behind you, Jeff, if you want.
I can't see that far. Transportation Committee, we only have one item, Uptown Improvement Project, project number 329, LPA agreement and construction. So I'll turn to the administration to give us an explanation.
Sure, thank you, Member Reisner. So this is for the Uptown bike and pedestrian, or basically streetscape improvements that we've kind of been talking about for the last couple of years. There's been a significant amount of public involvement over the last few months, and we're ready to move forward on construction. This was one where we received a grant, Transportation Alternatives Program grant for the from FHWA, and I'm looking at the dollar amount here on that grant specifically. I want to say it was in the $1.1 million range. for that. And we have about that much in local funds that we need to authorize as well. Some of that has already been spent as part of design, but then some will be appropriated as part of construction, and then we'll go forward here. We intend to take most of this out of 572, which is the street rehabilitation fund, and we're going to seek that appropriation in order to go ahead and bid this project. The scope of this project is, if you remember a few years ago, we did the West Union Streetscape project, which is, that one block of West Union there that we made fairly significant improvements to bike and pedestrian and lighting and street furniture and that sort of thing. This project does that on Washington Street and on State Street and Mill Street as well. So basically our cross streets in the uptown area. Additionally, we've included the crossing at Court and Union in that project to make that better from an ADA perspective, even though that block specifically isn't in this contract, that particular intersection is. And so that's the scope of this project.
Mayor?
If I may add to that, as Director Stone mentioned it, the intersection of Court and Union is really a critical piece of infrastructure when it comes to ADA accessibility. We were hoping to get that project done this summer in putting down, possibly, replacing the crossings to include the diagonal crossings with a stamped concrete product. We were really challenged in that we were trying to find a concrete company that could come in and do it or willing to do it. And the price that we were hearing was just astronomically high, almost $250,000 to do just the sidewalk crossing, to where the ADA ramp apron comes right down to the concrete crossing and will in the future make for a nice crossing. One of the things that is also interesting about this in that intersection unto itself, which is again part of this project, is there apparently is some interesting conflict probably the wrong word, but difference in opinions between the historic preservation and not the City of Athens historic preservation, but state historic preservation and ADA accessibility, with it being a brick street that is historic to the uptown area. So Director Stone and I are trying to weave our way through that as well. But in my opinion, to council, to make something that's truly ADA accessible for individuals who live with all abilities, to safely transition something, and in particular, one of our most heavily used pedestrian intersections is right there at Court and Union. And so more to come on that. But again, to Director Stone, his point, this improvement project is going to give Washington and State Street the same kind of look and feel that we've all experienced since 2017 on West Union between Court and Congress Street.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Member Swain?
And I agree, Mayor. Arguably, 2017 and what we did on West Union, arguably the most attractive block in the uptown area. That said, one of the things that makes it attractive is the fact that we were able to bury the utility lines. Will we be able to do that on Washington, State, and Mill with this project for the price that we looked at in our packet today?
Let me at least start with this. We did attempt, I'm digressing and I acknowledge that up front, we did attempt to do such a thing on the Stimson Avenue project, but with the AEP tariffs in place and everything, it would have cost us $1.5 million to try to do 3 city blocks. The complexity of State Street, when you look at the overhead lines there, both in communications, which is on the lower part of those poles, and electricity up above, we suspect that cost is going to be, equal to for one block, or maybe even higher than that. It's not easy. Washington Street, I think that we're still exploring that one to where we could potentially get those underground, because the electric runs there are not as complicated as the ones on State Street. But go down to State Street and take a look up when you're down there, and you'll see with transformers and the utility lines, and again the the poles also carrying a lot of the telecommunications along that corridor. It's complicated. Director Stone?
Sure. I think we'll be successful on Washington Street. There's, minimal amount of lines. There is one about half block of fairly significant overhead three-phase, but it really is only serving one location. And I think we can get that underneath the ground with AEP. We're still waiting on a price from AEP specifically for that. State Street, as the mayor mentioned, is a lot more complicated. One of the biggest challenges, and this is what drove cost on Stimson to a certain extent, is when you force utilities underground, particularly electric, not only do you put the lines underground, but you also put the transformers on the ground. And you gotta have a place to put those transformers. And then you also require private owners to transition from overhead service that comes into their building to underground service that comes into their building. And so if it's not built from the get-go underground, it's really, really hard. And we just haven't found a good way to go and make individuals on their property or property owners on their property go and bury their service line when previously they're served overhead, and figuring out how to allocate those costs. One of the things that we're kind of excited about is that with the 2022 PUCO tariffs for American Electric Power that they got awarded at the PUCO, I say awarded, but they got granted the PUCOs, there is a buried electric line tariff. So you can basically put that cost over time instead of fronting it to the utility up front. And so you can put it on to electric bills. And so that's one of the things we're exploring specifically for this project, to see if there's a way that we can not have to front the cost associated with that. But the short answer to your question, sir, is I think we can get Washington done. I don't know that we can get state done with this project.
Well, and I asked that in the context of what we did back, or what we did on East State Street back, 20-some years ago. And I think you would be hard-pressed to find very few people that say that East State Street is an attractive area now. So I guess the question would be, and I don't expect an answer tonight, but would it be possible to get some idea, some rough estimate before we take this all the way through the three-reading process, what it would cost additionally to do to get those utilities underground? Ballpark figure. We've
been asking for a little while from
Okay.
American Electric Power, so they owe that to me. I'll push the issue before this ordinance goes all the way through to make sure
Thank
we
you.
can know.
Other questions from committee? Members of council, any questions? Audience? Okay, well, thank you. That concludes Transportation Committee.
And we are adjourned at 7:28 PM. Thank you very much for being with us.